Hi, and welcome to the Director of Surgical Services Recruitment Toolkit. This is a 7-part video series, each about 5 minutes, taking you from start to finish, from opening the vacancy to closing the deal, and I'll include various resources in the show notes. Let's set the scene. You are the busy human resources professional who works in the hospital or surgery center and just received the dreaded phone call from the hiring executive that the Director of Surgical Services just turned over. Note that I didn't say C&O. More on that later. So you're the human resources generalist, specialist, director, or even VP, and you have a rec in front of you. Now what? Let's begin. We're going to break this introduction into 5 parts: facts to sound smart, acronyms and resources, key terms and concepts, tips and tricks, and the most important thing to know. Just to keep you on your toes, I'm going to start with this last bullet. What is the most important thing to know? It is that the Director of Surgical Services position is the most heavily recruited in the hospital. This is not my subjective opinion. HCA, the largest for-profit hospital health system, published a statistic that their average Director of Surgical Services turns over every 18 months. As human resources professionals whose job it is to see all or a large cross-section of positions in the hospital, possibly you've heard this to be true also. Now let's turn to a few facts to sound smart. First, we all know that academic credentials are important for nursing leadership as they compete in a world with MDs and MBAs to provide patient care and run the hospital. This dynamic is even more important in the operating room, which is so heavily tied to hospital balance sheets. Our research has shown that 43% have CNORs. A much higher percentage, 86%, have BSNs. 78% have master's degrees. And here's what may be a shocker. It reports to the CNO only 48% of the time. What is the average salary? $154,915. When asking what the salary should be for the Director of Surgical Services you're about to hire, use NerdWallet or Expatistan to compare your city to America's average. Congratulations, Colorado Springs. Then give your salary an uptick if you have more than 10 OR suites, or a downtick if you have fewer. That should give you a rough guide. Next, let's go over a few acronyms. Already, I mentioned a CNOR. You likely know that this means a certified OR nurse. His or her clinical skills are supposed to be good. Believe it or not, you should downplay this requirement. Instead, favor where the candidate has cut their teeth in the OR. If they have, the CNOR is relatively easy to get. A better acronym to look for on a resume is CSSM. This stands for Certified Surgical Services Manager. This certification and recertification is exactly the technical training an OR director will use on the job. It's relatively new, so just because your candidate doesn't have it doesn't mean they won't be good. But green flag candidates that do have the certification. Now let's turn to key terms and concepts. You'll hear the term active candidates and passive candidates. Very simply, unemployed candidates are active. The candidate that is looking privately and confidentially is passive. 2 things to say here. Don't ask passive candidates for references. That will spook them and they will ghost you. Make your offer contingent on positive references. Also, don't look down your nose at active or unemployed candidates. The Director of Surgical Services position has so many stakeholders, unions, the C-suite, the staff, the surgeon providers, that good directors of surgical services find themselves unemployed for brief moments of time. Pick them up off the active candidate pool. They're easier to recruit and start much quicker. Finally, key term taking the job order from the hiring executive is called the needs assessment. Bring the form with you into his or her office. I'll include a link to ours in the show notes. Let's now cover a few tips and tricks. First, the importance of titles. Remember what I said about the power struggle for authority in running the hospital between doctors, MBAs, and nurses? The struggle is real. So if you have deflated titles, like you call the person that runs surgical services manager, you'll find that your harvest of candidates won't be a trickle, it will be a drought. Spend your political capital to get the position titled director. Second, if you have one candidate interviewing, focus your time on recruiting a second candidate. And then don't stop. Try to have as many as 7 candidates interviewing at one time. We have found this experience is optimal for the surgeons that are inevitably brought in to meet finalist candidates and the start and stop nature of rebooting exhausts surgeons quickly. Ask your candidates about 4 key metrics. First, what was their case cancellation rate and what steps did they take to improve their numbers? Second, first case on-time starts and what steps did they take to improve? Same question for turn times and volume growth. So that's the quick start guide for your Director of Surgical Services. I know I glossed over some subjects that warrant a deeper dive. Feel free to call me with questions. My personal cell phone is 503-866-9497. And look in the show notes for a 1-page PDF that goes into more detail about this presentation, our needs assessment, and links to Chapter 2, Doing the Director of Surgical Services Search Yourself. Good luck and keep up the great work.